are going to be live in just a second here. All right, you're ready to go, Linda.
Hi, I'm Linda Van Hart, Visual Arts Coordinator for Common Ground on the Hill. Welcome to our Thursday night, week one gallery talk. You have the great good fortune to be witnessing two of our premier photography teachers, Alexandra Lane, we call her Sasha, and Sue Bloom. Together, they are going to inform and amaze you with the quality of their work. Sasha originally came from Slovakia and has been brought to our camp by Bob Reichlich. Uh, she attended for a year or two and had quite a talk with Maria Wong's husband about the technology of taking photographs, how to use a camera. And he was so impressed and talked so informatively about that experience to Maria. Maria says, Linda, we should look at her as an instructor. And we invite her back every year. Her work is remarkable, and so is her teaching. Welcome, Sasha Lane.
Hi, good evening. It's really nice to be a part of teaching at Common Ground. I have to say, I have encountered so many interesting and kind people along my way, and coming back as an instructor was just a pure honor. Uh, I just wanted to let you know a little bit about myself as a photographer. I first picked up a camera at the age of 15 when I borrowed one from my dad. I still remember the photos I took. They were, well, let me just say they were interesting. Um, but my passion for photography hasn't really diminished over the years. And later on, I bought my own digital SLR. Fell in love with that, yeah, and eventually I became a professional. I take portraits of anybody from families, babies, children. I have taken some headshots. Um, but for my own private collection, I try to photograph my own family. I love nature, especially florals. I try to travel with my family, so we have a lot of travel photos. And recently, I fell in love with photographing underwater, so I may share a few photos from my underwater experience with you. This year, I am teaching photographing storytelling class. Um, Interestingly, it comes at a time when we are hopefully at the end of a pandemic, and all of us have unique experiences in how we coped with everything that has happened. I am a big believer that storytelling is a part of healing, and I have seen this process in my class. I have had my students reflect on their experiences during pandemic, and they brought in some very interesting insights, some very deep thoughts. There was a bit of vulnerability. And I can say that everyone found it actually difficult to look back at some of the things that have happened, recall them, and retell them. And my hope is that through all of this, we will all connect as human beings, and eventually we will come to a point of healing. Of course, I have to say that there weren't only traumatic events in the pandemic. The pandemic opened up also a lot of opportunities for joy. Um, I would like to share a few photographs with you that are of my own, but then I would also like to share some of the work that my students both shared and did during my class this week. So let me start my presentation. And my sharing has been very intermittent and it is not sharing right now.
I
Let
can
me,
share for you if you'd like.
Let me try to give it one more time. Is that okay? One more try.
Sure, go for it.
Okay, and it looks like it's sharing now. So let me see it. Do
Yep,
you
we can
see
see your
it?
screen.
Okay, great. Let me just present. Okay, so the first 6 photographs are photographs that I have taken, and then I have 6 photographs that I would like to share from my students. So this photograph is from the pandemic. It's a reflection on the pandemic from my camera. Uh, as things slowed down when in March, when everything suddenly shut down, my family suddenly came to a standstill, and not necessarily in a bad way. Suddenly, we were not rushing from school to practices to concerts, school concerts, etc., and we were suddenly just staying put. And this opened up a lot of opportunities for conversations and play. And in this photograph, it is my daughter who's just casually laying in bed, projecting a bird on top of the ceiling. This following photograph may look a little strange. It is not from the pandemic. This is a reflection on our pre-pandemic world when we could still travel. I took it because it's somewhat abstract, and in some ways it kind of plays with your head. You ask yourself, what in the world is in the picture? My hometown is built around basically hot springs, and there are a number of pools, a lot of which are used for physical therapy. And this is one of those pools. The swimmer is my daughter, and this is one of my underwater photography adventures. And I just thought that it was interesting that there was a bicycle underwater. And it kind of confused my mind, that there's a window, there are stairs, and there's a bicycle inside the water. This is one of my florals. It's a flower that sprung behind our neighborhood in the midst of the pandemic. This is again one of my underwater photographs. This is a jellyfish, and I just felt like the color, the translucency of it, and the movement of it were very interesting. And I decided to capture it in a very basic way. Okay, so these are starting to be my student photographs, although I feel like we may have skipped some. Let me try to work this back a little bit. Okay, yeah, I think that one got skipped. 2 got skipped somehow. I'm sorry. This is a travel photograph. This place is called Garden of the Gods in Colorado Springs. And it's an example of my landscape photographs. And this is the coast of North Carolina. This year, photography speaking, I tried to push myself a little more to take more photographs that go up and down rather than landscapes. And this was one of my challenges to myself. All right, so I would like to talk a little more about my class and my students. I have to genuinely tell you that I am amazed by the amount of talent that my students are bringing in. Their creativity, their quick thinking process, just everything about them is amazing. And not only that, but they're also very kind and very supportive of one another. I split my class this year into sort of 2 subtopics. One is sharing stories from the pandemic, as I mentioned earlier, and the other part was class challenges that were designed to push students to pursue new techniques and get them out of their comfort zones so that they can come out of this class as better photographers. As I mentioned earlier, storytelling is very important to me. I know that this is an organization that focuses a lot on folk arts, and photography or digital photography is not exactly a traditional folk art, but what is storytelling. For centuries, maybe even thousands of years, people sat around, be it after work or around the fire, and told each other stories. In today's era, we live a lot faster worlds, and we don't necessarily sit around the fire anymore, or not that often. And storytelling has come largely into the digital world. It's on Instagram, Facebook, other social media. And it comes oftentimes in forms of photographs. That's why I think it's important, as we heal from the pandemic, that we share photographs that we have captured, we talk about them, we connect over them, and hopefully we'll learn our lessons, and we talk about our joys that we have experienced, and heal. So the next photograph I would like to show you is from my student Mandy. Mandy is a very gentle and soft human being, and you can see it in the way she uses light, in the way her shadows are very gentle. This was from her photographic essay about symbols of pandemic. The wall that you see used to be covered in beautiful photographs, but since the pandemic came, she had to replace the wall with a pegboard for face masks. Who you see in the picture is her 3-year-old, who is reaching after a face mask, and that was a symbol of the pandemic for her, because what we've been doing the entire year is reaching for face masks. The following picture is also from Mandy. Again, you can see her gentle and soft spirit in this photograph. This was from one of the challenges that I give students in class, and the name of the challenge was "What's in your fridge?" Mandy happens to have a lot of chickens, so what was in her fridge was a lot of eggs, and this beautiful composition is what she came up with as part of the class. This is Erin. Today, yes, Erin, I almost confused her name here. Today's challenge was self-portrait, and it couldn't be selfie, and it could not be a reflection in the mirror. It also was supposed to be creative, and it was supposed to show the spirit of the person. Erin is tremendously dynamic. She is full of energy. She laughs easily, and she's a teacher. I think that this is a brilliant description of who she is, and it's a very creatively executed self-portrait. This photograph is also from Erin, and it is from her photography essay about the pandemic. In the photograph, you see her son laying on his bed, supposedly doing schoolwork. You see his computer open, but in his face, you see the tremendous, deep despair. You see the exasperation. You see him working hard, but feeling like this is not getting anywhere. Apparently, what he was doing, you see on the ceiling, you see a green ball, and he would throw the green ball onto the ceiling. It would stick, and then he would lay there and wait for the ball to come down. All of the class felt that this is a very deep and touching moment, because all of us have gone through times when we share this exact same sentiment. This photograph is from my student Alex. It is also from his pandemic essay. Alex and his girlfriend made a life-changing decision during the pandemic to get married. The reason why they decided to get married is that they wanted, should something happen, they wanted to be a part of each other's medical care. honestly, this is not something that I would have anticipated happening. I don't know that anybody expected the pandemic to come, and I am sure that Alex and his now wife were planning to get married at some point, but probably not under those circumstances. Um, Regardless of what the circumstances were, I think that Alex created this beautiful picture of when he proposed to his wife. This photograph, I hope that you agree with me, it looks totally scrumptious. This is also from their challenge, What's in Your Fridge? Alex that day was going to have a quesadilla with avocado for lunch. So he quickly chopped up some avocado, put it on his quesadilla, and made this beautiful photograph. This was an exercise in some advanced composition techniques, and I can definitely see them in there. I think that color-wise and composition-wise, this is a beautiful photo. I think that this is it from my presentation, so I think I can stop sharing after this. I hope that you agree with me that my students just brought in so much creativity, such a bright and kind spirit. I am truly amazed every single day when I work with them. And I feel like they're not the only people learning. I feel like I'm learning as well. And tomorrow is our last day, so I wanted to just mention really quick what our challenge for the last day is going to be. Tonight, my students are working on 1 hour in my life photographic essay, which we will talk about in the morning. And then for the second part of the class, our photography challenge is going to be egg. And it can be a broken egg, it can be a cooked egg, it can be a whole egg, it can be a messy egg or a pretty egg, it can be 1 egg or many eggs. It doesn't matter about the composition. It doesn't matter if it's abstract or if it's a part of a landscape or still life. It doesn't matter what it's going to be, but the subject is going to be egg. And I think that everybody's pretty excited about that. I think that's going to be a fun one. So that's going to be the end of our week. And I hope that my students are going to submit a lot of their beautiful work into the student gallery, and you will get to see some of the things that they created there.
Thank you, Sasha. That was wonderful. Maria's going to be getting word out to everyone. We have a new website. I'm sure you're all grateful for her creativity and expertise in creating a new, very functional website. And because it is new, for those of you who are regulars at Common Ground or who were here last year, the submission of photographs of finished work from each week is going to be slightly different, and I'm sure that'll be coming out sometime tomorrow. The student art shows, which are normally on Friday evenings, have been replaced by really excellent gallery talks this year, since we can't have the student art shows in person. Tomorrow night, Dr. Robert Pullen and our very exciting elder Sakim will be presenting some education about the Muskogee Creek culture, and also enlightening you about what's been going on in this wonderful dream workshop that we've had all week. So don't miss that. Next Friday, Ellen Elms is talking about a fabulous mural. I actually drove to Johnson City, Tennessee to see this mural, and it is a remarkable composition, as only Ellen can put together through much research about the feminists who help get all women the vote. It's a pretty exciting presentation. And the final one, our Scott Scholar from last year, Felicia Gee, will be taking us into her father's studio. He was one, if not the first, African-American commercial artist in Baltimore, and is just an incredible artist and man, and a great influence on her life. And as a videographer, I'm sure that's going to be a stellar presentation. So the student art show will actually happen at the end of 3 weeks and be available for everyone to appreciate for the rest of the summer. So be sure and look for the photographs of Sasha's students included in that student art show. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague of many years and travel companion from many countries, Sue Bloom, who wrote the book on digital collage and painting. And as far as I know, it's been through multiple printings in something like 12 languages. Sue really teaches all over the world. She teaches online all over the world. And at one of the premier art camps in Maine, she's just returned from there, as well as being the former chair of the Art and Art History Department at McDaniel College. So Sue is a regular with us. Fortunately, like Sasha, she's teaching with us 2 weeks. And this week, she has taught the iPhone Explored. Take it away, Sue.
All right. Well, yes, this week has been the iPhone Explored, taking a look at the iPhone camera and what we can do with it. And people are amazed at what it's capable of, its little hidden functions that they didn't know existed. And then we've taken a look at a great many apps that can help push our photos to different places. So it's been an exciting week. The class has been full, lots of energy. It's been really good. So I'm looking forward to you seeing some of the work of these students a little bit later. Next week, I'm teaching an iPhone class that has to do with portraiture. You know, what can we do with the phone? It's with us all the time to make portraits that have some meaning. So I think that class is full. I'm not sure. There might be a seat. I haven't looked at the totals lately. So when Linda asked me to speak this evening, she said that she had as a theme perspective. And perspective means so many different things to so many different people. Let me share my screen here. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, you know, as Linda said, I taught at McDaniel as a professor there for 34 years and chaired the art department for 19 of those. Perspective always sort of meant in a drawing class, these drawings that would show the progression of space. And sometimes they were very sort of mechanical in their origins, not very free-flowing or sketchy. But perspective is something that I think all of us have looked at with, I'm going to push this for the full screen, see if that works. Let me know, it takes a second to sort of roll over here. There we go. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yes, great. Perspective has been, I think, forced upon us in a way with this pandemic. And so I sort of took it from the thoughts of how a creative person might deal with this pandemic. So my perspective has to do with this past year and a half, shall we say. So all of us experienced a bit of seclusion, if not total seclusion. I know we live in a woods up on a hill, and you know we had our groceries delivered from Instacart that did a wonderful job. We were incredibly circumspect about where we went, what we did. There were times we just needed to get out of the house, And so this sounds really silly, and I'm sure it is. But instead of putting our mail in the mailbox, the bottom of the driveway, we would actually get in the car and drive to town and go past the post office and put it in the drop box just to get out a little bit. And still you weren't dealing with people. I think for us, the hardest thing was being without the people that you love. And for me, that was especially difficult with grandkids. You know, we missed a year of their lives. We missed birthday parties. We missed games. We missed ballet recitals. Thank goodness we live in an age where we can use the phone and see each other that way. But obviously, it's not the same. So the classes that I originally had scheduled for last spring, I initially said, no, I'm not going to do that. I just don't think I can translate what I do in a classroom so well on the Zoom. But then I got to thinking, I have the time. I'm going to learn how to do this. And I found that it takes a lot of time to put together a really a strong Zoom class. But I feel like it has paid off not only to me, but to creative people that have taken the classes and who were craving, wanting to learn new things and so forth. So it's worked out well, I think. My husband and I learned how to binge watch TV. We had never done that before. So we would ask friends that we weren't seeing, you know, what had they watched and so forth. So we latched onto a few series that we saw through to the end. But one of the things that I think all of us were faced with was the purposeful use of our time. You know, how did we decide to use this gift of time that had been given to us? And some of the ways it worked out in my life, I spent a lot of time in the garden with flowers. They were a real solace. I cooked more than I probably should, and I would cook for other people and then leave it at their door. That was a way of sort of caregiving for people, letting people know that you cared about them. I had a dear friend that was dying of pancreatic cancer, and she liked my cookies, and I'd find out what kind she wanted next. And we would talk through the door, and I'd leave the cookies at the door. And it was something I could do during that time frame. I did a lot of research. I did a lot of reading. I did some creating, but I didn't feel like I did as much creative work during that time frame as I would have thought I would have. So there's a question in my mind, why was that? And I'm not sure. I was creating, but not the volume that I thought I would turn out. I had a big concentration on genealogical research. It's a great hobby of mine. And perhaps that ate up some of the creative time. I'm not sure. I watched too much news, especially about politics. And, you know, then you get to the point where I just can't watch any more of this, and you would turn off the television. Or, you know, daily information of things that were changing about the COVID medical situation. In early winter, I spent a lot of time trying to get vaccine appointments for us and for my husband's 96-year-old aunt that we've inherited. And it was like whack-a-mole. You know, I think I'd have one, and then it didn't plan out. And, you know, I had one for her at 96, and then they called me the next day and said, no, she can't come. We're only doing first responders that day. And I thought, who needs it worse than a 96-year-old woman? But so anyhow, we got through that. But it seemed like there were a couple months there that I was on the phone or the computer trying to achieve appointments for vaccines. Thank goodness that's behind us. But one of the things that was a surprise for me is that my classes I teach at other venues besides Common Ground, as Linda alluded to, those classes started to be full and have wait lists, and they wanted me to teach more. So I am so busy now teaching Zoom classes. I never would have thought it. The one I just finished for Maine actually had a man from Switzerland in the class who stayed up during the night to be able to take it live. I've had people from California, from Brazil, from Nashville, you name it. So one of the neat things about teaching on Zoom is that we still can put together a creative community that's got lots of energy and people are learning things left and right. But people don't have to drive to a venue or fly in, and they don't have to pay the accommodations and the food and all that. So it was much cheaper for people to do this. So it was sort of, I think, the perfect storm of creative people caught at home, wanting to learn more, and wanting to be part of a creative community of people. And so, as I told you about, we would go for rides in the car, go to the post office, and we would take off and just go down random roads. So I'm just going to show you a few pieces that I've taken during this pandemic timeframe. And as I gathered them the other day and put them together, I noticed a bit of a theme throughout. There's a real sense of a solitariness, I think, about them. These are all iPhone shots. I used to spend, Linda knows, she knew me when I was spending all my time in the darkroom. I did all these old processes and so forth. And, photography has been in my blood for a long time. But I've got to say, I'm excited about these iPhones and what they can do and where we might go with it. I made lots of still lifes because I said I was out there working with the flowers and I gather them up, bring them in, create lots of different still lifes. And the phone was my image catcher. Here we are going down a back road, the windshield wipers on. I don't care. I like bad weather. Bad weather's great to photograph in. Sasha, I bet you would agree, right? Yeah. Snow, ice, I love fog. Nothing gets me out of bed quicker than it's good fog.
I do agree. Bad weather is a lot better to photograph than good weather.
Yeah, yeah. So these are some iPhone shots this past fall. A little vineyard. There are lots of vineyards in Carroll and Frederick counties. But I think you can see what I was saying, that there is as I look at these in retrospect, there is a solitary nature, I think, to these images. There's that fog I was talking about. I teach a class that's called app dancing too, where we go from one app to another app to another app. Again, pushing the image to be all that it can be. And so obviously these images are not straight out of, for the most part, out of my camera, but ones that I have worked on just as I would work on them in a traditional or a digital darkroom like Photoshop. This is just the pathway behind my studio going back to the garden, the vegetable garden. I have this thing for horses. In my next life, I'm going to learn how to ride. But I've chased horses all sorts of places, photographing them halfway across the world. They're a beautiful animal. Yeah, look how alone this steer looks. I think we were all feeling this way. So I found this quote recently, and I just love it. So I don't think we were necessarily having lots of fun during the pandemic. I know in our family, we lost a loved one to the disease and barely saved another. So I wouldn't say fun is how I would describe these last few months, but the quote is still a valid one, I think. And the intelligence required for creativity got channeled in other kinds of ways, I believe. So as I say here, I think the fun aspect was greatly subdued. Although we're bringing it back up again, I think, and I know we're having fun in my classes. I think we had a search for meaning and the ability to use that term perspective intensified. I think most of us, even if we were very self-sufficient, I know Linda's a very self-sufficient person, that grew even stronger during this time frame by necessity and just pure grit, I believe. My husband and I tried to develop little methods, things that we would do to keep our local businesses and restaurants alive, what little things we could do. I think things were unusually quiet up here on the hill, but the quiet was good and it seemed appropriate. And I think um, I think we as artists usually have a great deal of empathy for other people. I think that's our hearts are always open. We wear them on our sleeves. And the very thing that makes us artists and being open to the rest of the world is also the thing that can be quite painful when there's pain. And I think we as artists sense other people's pain. So I think there was a great deal of empathy that occurred, especially for people that were really, really suffering as a result of this. I hope that we're done with it or nearly done with it. I'm hoping that things will go back to something that resembles normal. I don't know that it would ever be the same. But I think reflection might be another way to say perspective. So I went off the deep end with the perspective thing, Linda, but it seemed like I could not ignore how the COVID has given us perspective on ourselves as creative people and how we interact. And as Sasha was saying, telling stories, very interesting photos by those students. Really nice, Sasha. Thanks for sharing them, and thank them when you see them tomorrow. So that's what I have to say there. Let me unshare here. And let's see. There we go. I'm free to answer whatever questions anybody might have.
Well, I want to explore with the two of you. You brought this up, Sue. I like to call it the duality of shoot straight or manipulate. And you're both really good at that. Sue, I've explored it more with you because we've known each other so long. How do you feel about when you shoot straight? Are there particular settings or things that you're looking for to capture in a single shot at that moment right then? And when you manipulate, what triggers your desire to do that, and what techniques do you use?
There are lots of creative moments along the way of the process that we as artists go down. Yeah, I am looking for something that triggers me in some way, something that I feel like I connect with. There's something about that place, that spot, that quality of light, whatever it might be, that I use the camera, whether it's a traditional camera or it's my cell phone, but I use that as a gathering tool. It gathers that information for me. That doesn't mean that I don't spend time with that composition and figuring out how I'm going to frame it and how the lighting, how I'm going to treat that when I take the image. Well, once I bring the image back home in my studio and I look at it and I edit through what I have gathered on a particular day, I feel like it's my job as the artist to push that image to be all that it can be. And it isn't often exactly what I saw. It's more like what I saw with my mind's eye, and that it's to me to know my tools and my craft well enough that I can allow that image to flow. And we've been talking in my class, sometimes you'll come up with 6, 8, 10 different versions of a piece, and that the cream will rise to the top. One will speak to you more. There's something about it that resonates more. And so, although I do some straight photography, it is not often. I almost always feel the need to go in and apply my hand in um, other kinds of ways to push it, if you would. I have sitting on the desk. I didn't mean to have this. This wasn't a prop set here for the talk, but this is a piece I wanted to share with the group tomorrow. That started as a photo that I did in the south of France with the Camargue with the wild white horses, and I've collaged and worked on it in Photoshop. But beyond that, I'm also working in caustic hot wax. You know, something that goes back to the Egyptians. And so I'm not a purist about photography having to always look like a photograph and be framed and presented in that kind of fashion. Although that's a wonderful tradition and is perfectly apropos for some people's work. But I like to work in lots of mediums, and it's certainly okay with me that things cross over, that I draw and paint on a photograph, or as you can see in that one, I've collaged digitally, but then I've used an antique process on it. So again, when I took that photograph of those horses, I didn't know this end product would emerge this way, but I allow myself to be open to that process and to go where that image will take me. Sasha, how about you, hon?
First of all, I want to say I checked out your website, Sue, and I've seen your work. And I have to say that I truly admire what you do. And the reason for that is that working with textures, especially multiple textures, layering them on top of one another, is really hard. And it's hard to put together two very different textures and make them work together. And you are doing exactly that. I think that it truly takes a special gift and a special talent, and you have it.
Thank you.
My approach to photography, I won't say that it's completely opposite, but it does go to the opposite of the spectrum a little bit in shooting straight. However, I will say that some photographs are almost straight out of camera. For example, these two photographs, actually all three, I don't know how well you can see them, the yellow flower I presented, I did very little to it in post-processing. But then there will be some photographs that I take, and it might be that the moment is right, but the lighting is all flat. So I work with the natural shadows, but I will enhance it so that it brings out what I want the viewer to see. So I will say that not all of my photographs are shoot straight. A lot of them are manipulated, but I still strive for them to look as if, more or less, they looked just like what I was seeing when I was taking the picture.
Sasha, do you come from a background where you grew up drawing and painting?
Not such a strong background. I wish that I did. But when I was growing up, sorry to backtrack a little bit. I grew up in a very small town in Slovakia, which has about 5,000 people. And so my opportunities were somewhat limited when I was growing up. So we did have art at school as a part of our school curriculum, but beyond that, we didn't have much access to art education. So I definitely belong to the creative side of the spectrum as far as the child goes. And along with other kids, we did do all kinds of creative projects, but I actually never really took an art class.
So when you picked up that camera at 15, that was your first major artistic tool.
Yes.
And that was a real camera.
It was a film camera, actually.
Ah,
Yes, it was
and
a film
so
camera.
as you have continued to explore photography, your exploration, I think Sue used the word purist, um, looking at all the things you can do with the light settings, all the meter readings, analyzing your atmosphere, making your choices. You grew up in photography, making all those adjustments rather than coming from a drawing and painting background.
Correct. And with photography, you oftentimes actually can paint, especially when you get in situations that are a little darker. Because those allow you to use, for example, today in class, we were doing a challenge and I used rim light, which basically just does an outline of whatever it is that your subject is. And it's truly just painting white on a black background. But for that, you do need to learn how to set your camera and how to use the light in a way that it's going to render that particular image. And I suppose that that's what I find fascinating, that you don't just draw it, that you manipulate the tool to make it do what you want it to do. Another good example is I actually did have it originally in my presentation, but then I took it out and I replaced those two photos with my students' work. Um, I had pictures that were long exposures, and the settings were approximately the same, but just the way I used the camera, one came out completely abstract. There was just lines on it, blue lines. And the other one actually had an outline of a beach. And that's another way of, again, manipulating the machine, manipulating the settings so that they render the image that you have in your mind. Or how Sue put it, I actually wrote it down because it was really nice. What your mind's eye sees.
Mhm. Well, I know Sue grew up with a drawing and painting background. And I think that shows in her work, as she calls it, gathering, like she gathers flowers, to create a composition. She's gathering images. And when we've been on trips together, she'll be at an image many times and then later go through. And from that bouquet of images, select the one and then get all inspired by if she's going to print it on paper, if it's going to be printed on wood, what is the surface going to be.
I truly admire that level of eye when somebody can see the end result, but the steps to the end result are so many, and the journey is so long, and the steps are also so diverse. I honestly have a huge admiration for people who can do stuff like that.
Speaking of
Lots of
surfaces,
years. Lots of years.
yeah. Speaking of, did you want to react more to what Sasha said, Sue?
Not really. I feel like we have different approaches, but we still have the same sort of pursuit. We're open in that process, that journey of finding ways that we can make the kind of marks that bring meaning to us and perhaps to other people as well. What we're involved in is mark making, and we need to know our tools. That's why people take our classes. I think know the tools to know how they can make that mark. I think I've mentioned before, Linda, at another talk, that I sort of see artists as having this tool belt, like a carpenter's tool belt around their waist. And perhaps in that tool belt, there are silver halide crystals, there are pixels, there's clay, there's paint, whatever it might be. And you grab the tool that you've learned how to use that tool. That's part of the journey, learning these different processes. You grab the tool that will make the mark that is most appropriate for what you want to do. And again, I guess because I come from that drawing painting background, and still draw from a live model all the time. Um, I've been fortunate to be able to mix and mingle these kinds of techniques together, to sort of push my process, because it's in the process that there is that excitement as an artist, following your nose, so to speak.
If I can, Linda, if I can add to answer your
Sure.
question, I feel like Sue has more of a mindset of building out of the data that she has gathered, and the type of photography that I am practicing more photo documents what it already is, and I think that both are really important. My Where I'm coming with my background is that I have a growing family, and I want to stop them from growing. I want them to stay where they are in some shape or form. I don't want them to leave my nest. That's where I am. That's the point in life where I am right now. So I would say maybe that is propelling me and actually thousands of other moms to be photographing their children and their families and their endeavors.
That's true. That's so true. Speaking about surfaces, when you get an image, how much does the surface that you're going to print on lead the decisions in how you deal with that image? Do you photograph to print onto paper or canvas? I know a lot of people use giclée processes and stuff like that. I know Sue has tried many alternative surfaces. What do you print on, Sasha?
Traditionally, I print on fine art photography paper. Though that's what most of my photographs are on. For whatever reason, I have a very linear way of thinking or of arranging things. You can see these pictures in a perfect line, and I measured the line, it really is perfect. So a lot of my photographs, I see them as a unit, as a photograph on its own, and 9 times out of 10, I see it with a white border and a frame. That is my favorite way.
So you
My
print on
other,
paper and matte and frame with glass.
yes, that's how I tend to see things. Kind of like when you go in a gallery, kind of what you see in a gallery. These are a little bit of a departure from that style. These are basically just a simple canvas that's stretched on a frame. Now, I do have some projects in mind that will lend themselves being printed on glass. I have not followed through with that project, but I might do that at some point. And that particular picture that I have in mind is this very retro, at this point retro, but I actually used it when I was a little alarm clock. It still has the bells on top. And basically, at one point, I was in my parents' house and we were kind of organizing, and suddenly, like, we pulled out all these different alarm clocks, and we found like 12 of them, and they were all these different shapes and sizes, and all approximately from the same era. So I took pictures of each of them on just a plain white background, and now I have that whole setup, and that whole set. I'm sorry, and I'm thinking of printing those on glass in a very kind of a retro. I may do some editing to it to make it a little more retro and just have those glass prints. So there's a lot you can do.
So what surfaces do you find most intriguing? I know you've been very experimental with surfaces.
The surface has a lot to do how you treat the image with, obviously, its presentation. It's sort of you've it's like sending a person off for their big event of some sort. It's like, and so I put a lot of thought into how a particular image would best be presented. What type of treatment would be appropriate? And as you know, I've tried just about everything over time, and am always open to experimenting with new things. Print on metal, print on rice paper, print on acetate, print on glass. I've had to send that out. I can give you a name of a company that prints well on glass. Yeah, it depends on the image. The image will talk to you, and in my experience, and tell me how it will look its best.
I completely relate to that. You oftentimes look at an image and you know what kind of texture or look you would like to have on it. I'm not quite as much of a texture expert as you are, but I also have some textures in mind.
And also the image will tell you how big to print it as well. I remember a series, I don't know if this has been quite a while ago, Linda. I did a series on the Amish. Do you remember? It was black and white. And that was very straight photography. I did not manipulate those. It was documentary. It was called North of Paradise, that series. And there was something so intimate about these images that I printed them all small, framed them, like you said, with a white frame around them, requiring the viewer to come in close. That was part of the exchange that happened between the artwork and the viewer. And because I saw these as such intimate glimpses into this culture and these people, I purposely made them small to create that interaction. So somebody couldn't stand halfway across the gallery and really see them. They had to come in. So your images often will tell you what size you'll get a sense of scale.
That's great. This has been just wonderful. I'm sure what we're finding is that a small group of people will attend these gallery talks, but then once they're archived, dozens and dozens of people, over 100 often, will come back and look at these archived gallery talks. And the ones from last year are also available on the YouTube Common Ground official site. So if friends and family were not able to come to this wonderful duet between Sasha Lane and Sue Bloom, they can certainly tune in at their leisure to enjoy this wonderful discussion of photography. We've covered so many topics important to anybody that picks up an iPhone and expects to get a good photograph, or anyone who's still loving the use of a professional camera to take their images. Please join us tomorrow, 6:30 to 7:30, to welcome Robert Pullen and Sakim as they talk about the Muskogee culture and the importance of dreams. And by all means, join us at 8 o'clock this evening for a wonderful concert. Tomorrow, I believe at the concert, Sparky and Rhonda Rucker are being honored. And you will be able to see, in his absence, Robin Tillery is still with us as one of his flutes will be presented. So thank you for joining us this evening. We'll see you tomorrow night or later tonight at the concert. Thank you, Sasha and Sue.
Good night, all.